What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for your Overwatch. The Gladiators have been on fire in Stage 2, beating a number of up-and-coming opponents as well as heavy-hitting teams, not only looking very proficient with their standard dive play, centralized around their new acquisition, Fissure, who's probably the best Winston in the league, but also they've been able to pull out niche strategies to sort of counter the meta, and that's always an exciting thing to watch, and hopefully gives confidence to the other teams who pretty much adhere to meta slavery most of the time, even when they're still losing, which always makes me scratch my head. Why mirror the meta strat if you can't beat the enemy with it? I'm looking at you, Houston Outlaws, but anyway, they come out with this Mei wall that is used to block line of sight to ferry their team to flank the cafe setup, which normally is a defensive stronghold on this first map. If we take a look at the Florida Mayhem team comp, it's an incredibly stable 0.1 defensive comp because it's going to be good against multiple good strategies on attack normally. It's good against dive because it's really hard to get the key targets back in the cafe when they're under the protection of the Junkrat fire, and it's really good against 3 or 4 tank, which wants to go play on the point. And as we've described in other videos thus far, you want to make sure you have enough damage to split around the quad tank setup to get your damage to land in key positions. That's kind of why that nobody really runs quad tank, is because you can come out with a comp like that on defense, which is going to be good against both dive and quad tank, so it's kind of a bigger risk than it's worth. But I want to take another look at that quite beautiful opening attack and get more into specifics of why things worked where. The first major component, of course, is the alternate attack path, and this attack strategy is actually nothing new. It was used way back in the day at Apex. Libero, who you now know plays on NYXL, played back for Meta Athena back then, and they did all sorts of alternate Mei wall attacks and setups. And overall, I think the Mei wall is probably one of the most underutilized kits in Overwatch. It's difficult to make it reliable, which is kind of its issue, but using it here to block line of sight to create these small lanes that you can get your shotgun characters in fighting is quite an interesting idea. And oddly enough, Tavik is in the best positioning possible to deal with this. He just doesn't respond to the speed boost aggression that comes through, and if he did, I actually think this entire fight would fall flat on its face. Imagine if Tavik was able to boost himself back onto those balconies that are on Street's phase. If they don't land a hook on him, they're just not killing him, and he builds up a rip tire in the course of a few seconds. This entire push could have got destroyed there. Speaking of the clutch plays, I think the push would have fell flat again if hydration doesn't hit these really key icicles from range, which is kind of the problem with ever trying to strategize around Hanzo or Mei. Their projectiles generally are a bit unreliable, but if you are really good at landing them and setting up your shots and taking real clean, reliable shots, then you can find these kinds of frags. Normally, when there's a soldier out in the distance, you're going to favor the soldier in this case, even though Florida is down members right now. The positioning of the soldier to hold onto the high ground should kind of just win the fight eventually through attrition, as long as they survive long enough for their teammates to come back. But hydration hitting these long-range snipes is the difference maker of this comp having a massive mid-range damage drop-off problem. And overall, it all kind of just worked out cleanly. But I think in those two key instances, the Mayhem had the play in their hands, so to speak, to actually hard counter this entire approach. Transitioning into the Streets phase, you can start to get really antsy about the limitations of Mei here. However, since he's got his ultimate and Surefour swaps to cover the blind spot of the range deficit their team's fighting in, goes to the Widowmaker, and hydration gets a really conservative use of the Mei Blizzard here, freezing down the tanks so they can focus them. Really smart play because overall, he's going to want to be swapping off this Mei anyway. Against the really mobile team comp of Florida, honestly, the only thing you're going to get out of this ult is a D.Va after she's used her thrusters and can't get away. Keep in mind, that additional freeze time that Mei's endothermic blaster gets nowadays is not to be underlooked. Once you see an enemy get caught out with their movement, the freeze is a lot more effective at really shutting them down and punishing them out of position. Another thing a little bit unfortunate about Florida's play, overall, I don't think they're very good at this map. They do a lot of things that I'm scratching my head over often, even though Florida is a massively improved team from Stage 1, don't get me wrong. They're playing a lot better, but up against this Lucio Zenyatta Widowmaker, because there is no mercy to pocket target the Widow. I think they should be going after the Widow hardcore and dropping the idea of fighting on the cart, which honestly just empowers this Mei. If you don't end up bursting down either the Zenyatta or the Widowmaker from range, it's not so much Mei's DPS that you're scared about, it's the crowd control of her being able to freeze and isolate targets that's going to enable the damage from those two range sources. If you're watching a lot of Overwatch League, you might know that Zenyatta just is straight up a DPS right now. If your name is Shaz or Jonak or Jaehong, keeping those guys alive to deal damage in the back is definitely something that you should prop up. And though Hydration does get caught off, dies with the Mei, he comes back as Doomfist, which again adds this extra brawly frontline manipulation element that these flex DPS picks that Hydration likes to go to. It isn't just Hydration hitting all of his abilities that's so impressive here, it's how he hits them. Doomfist starts to look incredibly scary, not just for knocking around Reinhardt, that often isn't good enough in my opinion. When you have characters like Sombra that can hack him or Junkrat that can straight up just deal damage from range, it's about the crowd control of where he puts him from his rocket punch that ends up working so well. Again, if the tanks are forced to brawl in an unfavorable spot, they turn out to just be glorified punching bags and they have no control on this engagement whatsoever. It could be easy to tunnel vision on the cool things Hydration's doing, but think of how much it's helping the rest of his team and how everyone else is basically uninhibited and able to fight on their preferred matchups. I cannot undersell the amount of disruption that this added to the team comp here. Honestly, I'm not against the triple tank to go up against the Doomfist, but you absolutely have to land a hook on him, and you have to stabilize your team comp and play in a really solid formation. If you allow yourself to get split up and surround it at all, it's just gonna get demolished by this team comp, which is more or less eventually what starts to happen. The multi-tank is allowed to get their backs against the wall, so they stabilize here, but LA's got a few minutes and a ton of ultimates to come back into this fight. And who's the target again? We're just knocking around the Reinhardt. He can't do anything. They finally focus down the Doomfist, but you can't lose your main tank in this exchange. It's just not really acceptable. FREEDO really had to figure out how to focus down the key targets from the Gladiators team comp here before it overwhelmed them and created a mid fight, because overall that multi-tank comp I think can work, but the abilities have to land on the Doomfist fast enough before he takes out your main shield, because of course the mobile dive comp doesn't need the main shield nearly as much as the slow multi-tank comp does. Really sick play, and overall Hydration has just come alive in stage 2 as a very impressive flex player, showing up big on the Pharah. He comes back here with a fast run back with his Doomfist yet again, gets back to the cart really quick, and then is able to just close the door on any possible incoming stall and retake. Another thing that Doomfist, of course, is incredibly good at, running back to a point and quickly bursting down stall characters. It's a big aspect of the game, something that I think a lot of people don't remember or kind of forget to consider. Sometimes you can get in those situations where you're convincingly winning the fight, but the stall characters stay alive on the objective to halt your progress so long that often all those kills you got in the fight you thought you won start to come back and reset the team fight anyway. Gonna take another look at Hydration's Doomfist here, which does get unleashed yet again. The only problem being Jake was able to pick off Shaz's Moira at the start of this fight, which meant that these insane burst kills that Hydration's getting isn't gonna end up working out, but he sticks on the Doomfist. And overall, people need to be scared of how good Doomfist can be in these situations, especially when you're on a tight map like Control Center. And it's interesting to see when Hydration plays up against these pro level players that things start to kind of look like they do in my ranked games when a Doomfist is taking over the game. If the Doomfist's movement and ability usage is just too good, the enemy doesn't know what the heck to do. To make the carry potential of Doomfist feel similar to like Widowmaker, where if you're able to pop off on the abilities, the entire enemy team is gonna have to rethink how they take those engagements against you. Overall in this round, the Outlaws does a pretty good job of containing this team comp. They put up a pretty big lead, but the Gladiators are able to regain control, and that's where the McFist team comp is going to start to look really scary. And the reason why you're going to see a lot of teams go to the multi-tank against the Doomfist is that even if the Doomfist plays perfectly, it can take a lot of his resources to even kill one tank, and if you're able to catch some of that damage with either Zarya bubbles or D.Va defense matrix, you can kind of outlast a lot of that damage. The only problem is Doomfist is quite good at focusing in on both Moira and Lucio. More Fissure, of course, has her 6-second fade, but Doomfist is likely going to be able to catch her with either the rocket punch or his slam that's going to close the distance on her and make her really nervous. Lucio as well, who normally is a really tough target to hit because of how much he can heal himself, especially against sustained damage. The burst damage comes in hard and fast, and even though they're able to focus down the aggression, trading the life of hydration for the enemy team's Lucio is an incredibly big deal. Now, because the Gladiators have both their healers, mainly their Lucio, even more importantly, the repositioning game here is incredibly confident from the Purple People Eaters, and Muma, being out in the middle all slow, no Lucio to speed him around, ends up losing the Reinhardt battle convincingly, because overall the triple tank needs their healer combination even more than the 2-2-2 McFist comp needs it, because the triple tank is more reliant on that Reinhardt shield blocking the range damage from Asher, because Asher's playing out in the distance. If the tanks don't have speed boost to go close the distance on him, he's just gonna plink away for free, and of course if they don't focus hydration, he's gonna freely float in and out doing what he wants to do, and of course there's a big defender's advantage here as well. With all of this control of the engagement working out, Gladiators build up another Graviton that just shuts the door on this entire round and map. I love this McFist team comp. I hope we get to see it a lot more in stage 2, and I think we will if the Gladiators make the playoffs, which I'm just going to go ahead and say I think they will. This last clip isn't necessarily an off-meta comp. It's quite a meta one, actually. One even more so that you might think could get utilized in the most current patch of the game, because of course they're playing on the old Sombra, but a lot of contenders team on the current patch are using Sombra in both the DPS and support slot depending. She's really powerful. I think it's quite interesting though how difficult this makes Lynxer's Widowmaker, who's one of the best widows in the world by the way, not have a lot of targets to deal with, because if you had a Zenyatta in that Sombra slot instead for a standard 2-2-2, you'd have another target that's quite susceptible to the Widowmaker lines of sight, whereas swap that out for the Sombra, there's another zippy character that can potentially be a backline harasser threat, and you can kind of supplement some of the healing you would have lost with the Zenyatta getting swapped out. Overall, this kind of just helps mute the impact that the enemy Widow has, and something that I think you can think about in your ladder games as well. But overall, the interesting thing here, of course, is that the flex player hydration got put on the Lucio, and at this point, with a really sick Pharah, Doomfist, a solid Genji, and now he's popping off on the Lucio, it leaves us asking, what can hydration not play? Really awesome to see what he can add to his team. Guys, what did you think of this pro analysis video? Did you enjoy it? If you did, be sure to leave a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're going to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, dank memes, and Overwatch League predictions. Do you think the Gladiators are going to make the Stage 2 playoffs? I do. I think they're winning out this last week. I'm excited to see them try to go up against the Juggernauts, NYXL, and London. I don't know if I think they can challenge them, but definitely going to be a fun week of Overwatch ahead of us. That's been it for me, guys. It's been FREEDO for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.